A.J. Al Moore is a Vietnam veteran who served with the 7th Squadron, 1st Air Cavalry, 1st Aviation Brigade in 1968 and 1969. He is a retired entrepreneur, having spent over 45 years in the information technology industry. Warpath is Al's first book. It explains his journey from highly patriotic, eager soldier through his disillusionment, PTSD, sometimes overwhelming feelings of guilt, and eventual recovery. Al served as the president of Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 48 in Norfolk, Virginia during the mid-80s. He was active in the veterans movement and played a role in the VA's eventual recognition of Agent Orange-related health issues as service-connected disabilities.
Hi, it's my pleasure to introduce Al Moore, who is a Vietnam veteran and was a scout in a air mobile air cav unit. Al and I were platoon mates and interacted, and I totally blocked the whole thing out until about 2017 when I encountered Al at a unit reunion in Nashville, Tennessee. And we introduced to each other again, and we started talking, and it was just a gush of memories from there. And it was an amazing experience. And from then we stayed in contact. I was, interestingly enough, only about 50 miles from, 60 miles from where he lived when I'd moved to the Eastern Shore of Virginia. And so we got to visit with each other. We've been with our wives. We've been to lunch together, and it's been a very positive thing. We have ongoing communications by phone, and and we were in the soldiers civilians first NEH project that National University did too. So without any more, Al Moore.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. And Tom and I were close in Vietnam. He was actually my wingman on one of my most successful scout missions. So he knows of what I speak. I'll say that. And I have to admit, I did not have as difficult a time putting my book together as Susan described. And I admire her for the effort that she put in to accomplish that. I wrote my book as a memoir of a chronological recounting of my experience in the Army. And I wrote it primarily for my immediate family to understand, what I had experienced and how that could still be affecting my day-to-day life 50 years later, which is really hard to imagine, but true. As I understand your assignment as it related to my book, you were to read the very tail end of it, which described my return home and my eventual pursuit of PTSD therapy. So I'll try to avoid repeating too much, but I think it'll be helpful in case you didn't read the early part of the book to give you a little context of what Tom and I experienced in Vietnam. First and foremost, I was a true believer. I volunteered for the Army in 1967, enlisting to be a helicopter mechanic and crew chief. As a crew chief on an OH-6, commonly called the Loach, I was able to fly combat missions about twice a week, and the Loach was a two-man ship. Therefore, I sat in the left seat next to the pilot, who was on the right side. I was taught to fly, as all the scouts were, so that we could, in an emergency, land the helicopter if the pilot was to be shot, which was a common occurrence. We were called scouts because we were always the first ones into a landing zone or pickup zone to make sure the LZ was safe for the larger troop carrying ships. We also performed when they didn't have an LZ picked out, we would perform search and destroy missions in the truest meaning of the phrase. It was not uncommon for us to actually follow footprints to track an enemy to his hideout. We were very close to the ground, 3 feet off the ground, and most of the time we were hovering with virtually no forward airspeed. This required us to also engage the enemy at very close range when we found them. It was often less than 50 feet, and more often in the 25 to 30 feet range. That role was exactly what I enlisted for. After listening to my dad's and my uncle's World War II stories, as I mentioned, I was a true believer. I wanted to get in there and prove that I could do that as well. That I wasn't harboring any cowardice or shirking of my patriotic responsibilities. Let's see here. I got to refer to my notes here. To get back briefly to our engagements of the enemy, because we were so low and so slow, it was a matter of who was the quickest and deadliest shot. Opportunities for trauma were everywhere, every day. If you weren't being fired at, you were often working in an area where there were numerous dead bodies on the ground. It was a pretty ugly scene. And those, could and did have a significant impact on my psyche, I know. I suffered, like most people, nightmares, insomnia. Those were the most frequent. Another thing that I suffered, very strong feeling of alienation. When in a group, in a social setting, particularly since I chose a business career, these gatherings were extremely stressful for me. I felt that I didn't belong, no matter where I was. Even within groups of the company that I owned, I felt that I did not belong. I had an extremely difficult time because I had these recurring thoughts about, number one, these people have no idea what I've done or what I've seen. Number two, I wonder what they would think of me if they knew what I had done and what I had seen. And I often wondered, could they do what I had done? So in these social settings, despite the business requirement to do the opposite, I was often very standoffish. It was a very complex set of emotions that I experienced each and every time I participated in something like this. They were very contradictory feelings. Number one, of inferiority, because, I was the guilty killer. I felt less than the other people in the room. And I often felt, alternately, a feeling of superiority because I was the brave warrior. I put myself out on the line in an extremely difficult job, and live to tell the tale. Get my notes out of here. I have to apologize because I have begun experiencing some short-term memory problems. I mentioned this to Susan and Lorna. And back in February, I discovered that my brain was shrinking. And Brown University has published a study this year that said they've linked brain shrinkage in veterans to exposure to Agent Orange. So they got me coming and going. In 2009, I underwent quadruple bypass surgery. I had ischemic heart disease, also a result of Agent Orange exposure. Because I was delirious when recovering from anesthesia, they placed me in an induced coma for over a week. Upon regaining consciousness, the the surgeon told me that I had a severe case of PTSD and needed to visit the Veterans Administration immediately, which I did. I started PTSD therapy, which I still participate in on a monthly basis, but the mild symptoms persisted. The nightmares, sleepless nights, the feelings of alienation. I understood those symptoms much better, but they were still there. I came to believe that you can't cure that, the best you can hope for is to recognize those and manage their impact on your life, because they are always going to be there. In 2015, things took a dramatic turn for the worse in my life. The pilot with whom I had flown my most successful missions was killed in a motorcycle accident in Arizona. In the intervening years, we had become quite close. I visited his home in California. He visited my home and my family here in Virginia. We stayed in contact pretty religiously. When in Vietnam, we scored our first confirmed kill together, which was a red letter day for a scout. And we even had captured a VC flag on that same day, which I have hanging over my desk now. I inherited when he died. So at the time, we were in a pretty high status situation, I'll say. However, when he died, I felt I had lost the major link to my past. It was an emptiness that I still can't describe, because he had shared in so many of my adventures. Now, I kind of felt like I was out here alone in terms of dealing with my memories and, being able to celebrate some of our accomplishments. We had a mutual respect that just could not be replaced with anybody else. At that point, upon his death, my PTSD symptoms got much, much worse. I was having what they've told me was disassociation, where I'd be sitting across a desk from somebody and suddenly it would feel like they were telescoping in and out of my vision. Where I had a fisheye lens, the next minute I was looking through a telescope. I mean, it was pretty bizarre and scary. So I figured I pretty seriously needed to get back to the VA and get some more therapy. I decided to write Warpath after much urging from my wife in 2019. I felt like it was, time to get these experiences on paper, put them in a format that my family and friends could access, and better understand some of the weirder characteristics that their dad was exhibiting, especially my social awkwardness. And even if I didn't show awkwardness, I was extremely uncomfortable in social settings. It's really it's hard to describe in a manner that would really allow you to appreciate what I was going through at that point. So, I wrote the book, share it with them. It took me 3 years to get it onto paper, have it professionally edited and published. I used Amazon Press for printing and distribution, and I did a moderate amount of pay-per-click advertising on Amazon and Facebook. I had learned quite a bit about that in my profession as an IT entrepreneur, so I leveraged those skills and was able to market the book pretty effectively. Let's see here. I made the book available in 2 formats, paperback and Kindle. And, my advertising effort, which was really pretty limited, seemed to be pretty effective. I sold 5,000 copies of the book, which other writers have told me that's, pretty good for an amateur first effort. I also learned a ton about the publishing business. And I don't know if we have any aspiring authors in the audience, but I came across a resource called Readsy. And if you're contemplating writing a book, Readsy is a clearinghouse for a literally worldwide pool of talented individuals that can help you with everything from developing the concept of the book through the final editing and printing. It's all done on a RFP proposal basis. They're highly reputable, and they have virtually no complaints posted against them. Of course, all these resources are going to want to charge you a fee for their services, but I found it to be well worth it. The name of that clearinghouse, I don't know if I mentioned it, is Readsy, Reedsy. I highly recommend it. And like I said, I was surprised it did well, both in the ebook and the paperback. 5,000 copies went out, and believe it or not, I published it 3 years ago. It's still selling today. It actually got a big following in Australia. I don't know why. I sold it in Europe, Germany, and the UK, France, but Australia beat all of them combined. I have no idea why. Writing the book was sometimes difficult because I had to dredge up old memories. I had to confer with Tom on a number of stories. I looked at old unit rosters, researched some old Army orders as best I could to come up with the names. And then I confirmed the accuracy of my memories with 3 surviving scouts, along with Tom, who were in the platoon at the same time I was. So that they certainly kept me from exaggerating too much. While it was difficult for me, it was also extremely therapeutic. And I know this might be a little bit difficult to understand, but it gave me the opportunity to organize my memories and thoughts in a way that it was very orderly. So when I thought back on my Vietnam experience, I could put just about everything in its place and line it up so that I wasn't confused about what happened when, and I wasn't subject to that kind of stress from that kind of confusion. It did achieve its goal. My family and friends liked it, gained a tremendous insight into my Vietnam service. And even among my Vietnam veteran friends at our local VVA chapter, they were stunned that I had done some of these things, which kind of gave me a little bit of pleasure that here the guy in the suit and tie, the little businessman, had been, a deadly cavalry warrior. It was just something they didn't anticipate whatsoever. Let's see. One of the big things is I think it opened up a path for my children to understand my experience and to pose questions that they might not have been able to come up with if they had not read the book. And I was able to present this stuff, all this information about me in a non-threatening, kind of a humble way that did not put them off. Undoubtedly, the biggest positive impact that I received from writing Warpath was the reception that it received from other combat veterans, even of the Iraq War. I had literally dozens of combat veterans contact me and tell me, oh, your experiences were just like mine. Your emotions were just like mine. Your treatment, among the public was just like mine when I got back. You're the first, I heard this a number of times. This really surprised me. You're the first person, Al, that I've been able to talk about this with since I got back from the war. Mm. And that stunned me. I mean, because I live in a military town. It's a Navy town, but it's a military town. And I was getting those kind of comments literally from all over the country. I've never talked to anybody about it, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to go down to the VA and I'm going to get some PTSD therapy because you say it helped. I believe you. I'm going to follow up on it. I strongly encourage them to get down to the vet center and see if that PTSD therapy might help him. It's helped tons of my friends, and it's there for the asking. Doesn't cost a dime, and they can get you they can get these guys into all kinds of services provided by the VA. Some are lifelong, some are 4-week episodes, but they're expert at tailoring those services to your particular need. I would say, all told, writing Warpath turned out to be a very, very positive experience for me. It added a great deal to my life, and I think my life was enriched by it, particularly through the contacts that I had, with other veterans who I would have never met. I would have never come in contact with them. And to see those people also get some positive value out of it was very, very heartwarming. My only regret, and for me, this was a big one because he was my hero, I did not write it while my dad was alive. He was a combat vet, having served as an infantryman in Europe during World War II. He was captured by the Germans in 1945 and barely got out alive. And it would have really meant a lot to me if he could have read these stories and understood what we had in common and known that, or come to know that he did not have to deny his PTSD, which he did throughout his entire life. He was in total and absolute denial, even though when I was a young child, I remember hearing him in the throes of his nightmares. And I heard him talk to my uncles about his experiences. And I knew damn well, he had PTSD, whether he would admit it or not. And of course, when he came home, they didn't have as much in the way of effective therapy. It was, either you were a nut with combat fatigue and belonged in the hospital, or you were okay, God love you, get out there and get a job. There wasn't anything in between for that generation. And I'm very fortunate there was from us. But, it was his service and bravery that inspired me to serve and do what I could for the country. Even with all the guilt feelings and the problems that I've had as a result of Vietnam, I can honestly say I wouldn't change it. It is a gigantic part of my life. I wouldn't be who I am without it. And frankly, I can't conceive of what I might be like as a person without it. So I wouldn't want my son to do it, but I did it and survived, and I think I'm a better person for it. I know I went on for a while here. If you've got any questions whatsoever, I'd be willing to answer them. I don't try to hide anything that I did or saw. So, any questions?
Yeah, in the book you talk about moral injury therapy or groups that you participated in, and
Yes.
I wondered if you could say a little bit more about what that process is like. I assume it has to do with like talking through your memories and trying to reframe them into a narrative that is more healthy.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's basically talk therapy, and they help you. The therapist helps you through a process of not excusing your behavior, but rationalizing it, so that it kind of softens the impact of having killed people. When I first went into therapy, I'll be honest with you, I had a very difficult time distinguishing my behavior from that of an German soldier, a German SS soldier. Because, when we went into free fire zones, we killed people. They suffered the death penalty. And more often than not, unless they were literally shooting at us at the time, it was the scouts who executed that sentence. And, regardless of all the therapy, that's a hard thing to live with. Because that activity does not reconcile with your beliefs about the morality of a war. And the purest form of the act, it's hard to distinguish that from murder. But we did not take prisoners. So, and we didn't let them go free. So, you can imagine what the outcome of that was. And I hope that the book explained our motivation and how we were looked at by our fellow soldiers, and particularly in the scout platoon, you were kind of graded by how many people you killed over the span of your tour and on a particular mission. If you went out, flew around all day, didn't score any confirmed kills, that was a failure. And while I've found people, or I've discussed it with people who found that mindset hard to accept, and I try to get them to reset their thinking to an environment in which a World War II or Korean War fighter pilot operated. They didn't take off in the morning and go out and fly around hoping not to find enemy aircraft. They went out there to find enemy aircraft and kill those pilots. This was absolutely no different. They got to paint airplanes on the side of their ships. We didn't paint bodies on the side of our ships. But we all knew among our small group of 12 scouts in the platoon who were the high scorers, the highly successful guys, and who went out and couldn't find anybody. So that whole environment was a major morality reset. And I still experience those feelings of guilt today, because the people we were killing were patriots for their country. And I came to believe that in a very painful way when I read, upon returning, 30 some books, believe it or not. I got a reading list that documented the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. And it's an extremely ugly picture. It was an imperial, aggressive war because we wanted them to adopt our way of life. And if you read much about Vietnamese culture, you learn that that was a completely impossible undertaking. They supported their own national movement. They did not understand the concept of voting. Their Mandarin philosophy kind of ruled that out. And we could still be there today killing Vietnamese people, and they would still not adopt a democracy. I firmly believe that. We could have nuked the North, would have made no difference. They were totally committed to their independence. We were the heavies. We were trying to force something upon them that they did not like or want. And I would say today that the majority of Vietnam veterans that I know, when I was very, very active in the veterans movement in the 80s, very active, I would say the majority of Vietnam veterans today still cling to that belief that we were trying to save them from a northern invasion, which was completely not the case. And that's hard for a lot of people to accept. And I know for a fact that it's extremely hard for the parents of the GIs who were killed in Vietnam to accept it. And I try in these veterans gatherings and whatnot, I always try to avoid expressing that view to the parents because, whatever it is they're clinging to as far as a belief system to get them through today, I don't want to disturb that. There's no good in it. But I'm pretty adamant and dug in on my perception of the war because when I came back, I was totally confused, and I read everything I could get my hands on until I felt like I had a good understanding of what in the hell I was doing over there. It's it's a story for the generations, I think. Any questions? I've gone on and probably beyond my time frame.
I just want to say, as a civilian and as the wife of a first cav crew chief.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Okay.
I'll ask you in a private email sometime about Scouts and Hueys. I got a little confusion there. But at any
Okay.
rate, I'm extremely grateful that you wrote the book. I started to read just the end because that was our assignment. And I quickly went back to the beginning because I was like, I want to know the whole story. And I couldn't stop reading. I think it took an enormous amount of courage, and I know you're going to be very self-effacing about this, but to decide late in the game to get help. I know you were kind of forced to because of dissociation and stuff, but I think that took an enormous amount of courage to face up to the fact that, you know, um, things were kind of falling apart and you needed to figure them out. And also, as a mother of four and a grandmother of three, I'm also grateful that that story's out there. I don't think that your children are the only children will benefit from hearing the truth from someone that was there, especially because of the way you chose to work through it. You know, I think that there are, as we all know, there's PTSD of varying degrees from every single war. And I think that, you know, you've just set such a fine example of the benefits to grappling with that. So I'm just very grateful, and I want to thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for the really kind words. I really appreciate it.